right into it, Tony. Of course, after the shock subsided over the departure to Michigan, of course, there was a running backs coach role to fill, and it's been filled by a Big Ten rival coach here with Carlos Locklyn coming in from Oregon.
Yeah, you lose a coach to a Big Ten rival, so what do? You go grab a coach from a Big Ten rival. Ohio State, Ryan Day's been doing that lately. Of course, Chip Kelly, and now going and getting Carlos Locklyn from Oregon, who has a pretty interesting story. He's only been a position coach in college football for 3 years now. First year was 2021 at Western Kentucky, I believe, and then 2 years at Oregon. But what I found most interesting, we talked to a couple of running backs on Wednesday, Quinshon Judkins and Dallin Hayden, is everybody's had previous relationships with them. They knew the guy. I believe Quinshon said that Locklyn offered him at Oregon, and then Dallin Hayden said he's known him for a while because Hayden is from Memphis, and Locklyn was at the University of Memphis in like a high school liaison capacity and also like a volunteer capacity. So he knew him from that time. So there won't be so much getting to know you. There'll be a little, obviously, but they already know the guy. So I think that's pretty interesting. But Ryan Day said, I think they interviewed like 7 guys for the job, and they considered several others. But ultimately, it comes down to Carlos Locklyn, and ultimately it comes down to Oregon maybe not paying him enough to keep him, based on what happened to all of the other running backs coaches that Ohio State was interested in. They made a bunch of people a bunch of money, and so Locklyn will make more money and also get to do it in Columbus, which is obviously a much better place than Eugene, Oregon. I mean, come on.
That storyline sounds kind of familiar, that situation. Guy not getting paid enough, moves on. Okay. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, everything that I've read and heard about Carlos Locklyn seems very positive. Very imposing figure standing there. I mean, he's built like a tank, it looks like. And so he's going to provide an example for how his guys, he played running back at Chattanooga, which I believe is FCS. And then was in Memphis for a while at 4 different high schools, served as a coach there, then moved on to University of Memphis, as Tony said. Has only been an on-field full-time assistant coach at the FBS level for 3 years, 1 at Western Kentucky and 2 at Oregon. So this guy has got a rocket strapped to his back going up the food chain and passing a lot of people who've been doing this for a very long time. But there's got to be some rhyme or reason to this. And I think obviously, again, this is a case where Chip Kelly and his ties back to UCLA and going against Oregon and knowing and understanding, what the personnel were at those other schools that he was going against, he had to at least be aware of what Carlos Locklyn was doing at Oregon to know that he would be a good fit for Ohio State. So gets him back into this hemisphere, quasi east of the Mississippi, I guess. And Memphis, sits right on the Mississippi, so I guess you'd say that. But he'll be connected with this entire region. I mean, really, all the way down to Florida, I would think, with contacts and people and different ways to recruit running backs. So I think it's going to be a positive thing, as Tony said. Deceptively well connected. I mean, as you'd say it, because again, he was also at Florida State for a year or two, I believe, in the interim before he went to Western Kentucky. So he's been around a lot of different places and worn a lot of different hats. And seems like now is the time in his late 30s that he's coming into his own as a college football assistant coach. And Ohio State's going to get some of the best years out of Carlos Locklyn, it looks like.
Yeah, let's not undersell his time at Florida State. I mean, albeit it wasn't a long time, but director of high school outreach, which is important because Tony Alford was Ohio State's area recruiter for a good part of the state of Florida So you want somebody who is familiar with the landscape there. And if you're a coach that's, worth anything, you're recruiting the state of Florida. You know where St. Thomas Aquinas is, you know where IMG Academy is, you know where Tampa Jesuit is, you know where these schools are, but having relationships already in place is never going to be a bad thing. I think that, it's a very interesting hire. I mean, it's going to be maybe a little bit of a change in just, in tenor of, the messaging. I think that, I think Tony Alford was a little bit more of a, let me get my arms around you and, let's hug it out. I think that Carlos Locklyn probably has a little more of an edge to him. And this doesn't mean necessarily an adversarial type of thing, but I think, if you're screwing up, you're gonna hear about it, and it'll be interesting to see how all of these pieces fit together. But to Tony's point about making a lot of coaches a lot of money out there, I was talking to a writer out in Oregon who said that at one point Carlos Locklyn was like the lowest paid Power 5 assistant coach out there. Oregon brought him up to $400,000 in this latest deal that he'd signed. Word on the street, I've not seen any documents yet, is that he's going to be making like $650 at Ohio State. So to Steve's point, meteoric rise is right, and I think Ohio State is still getting in pretty much on the ground floor with him.
One of the interesting things
I'll throw in that one of our writers from a 24/7 site at Oregon passed on is that he calls himself the walk-on coach, which basically all these other coaches, are basically on scholarship, earned their way to this job or whatever, or were hand chosen for all these different positions that they have. But he's the walk-on who had to earn his scholarship as an assistant coach at college football, is kind of how he views it, with a chip on his shoulder that he's going to do it better, faster, stronger, meaner than everybody else. And he demands excellence out of his position group, wants them to be the best position group on the team as well. So that's the holding guys to high standards. You're never going to get low marks from me for that. So a guy who's actually going to coach the players, not that Tony Alford didn't, but that's a good sign for me.
Yeah, a guy who had been like a coordinator in high school, offensive coordinator, and then basically volunteered in the weight room at Memphis, I believe, for a year, and then was elevated to like a high school liaison, and then went with Mike Norvell, to Florida State in that same kind of role, and gradually grew into a position coach. And with his background, he's originally from Alabama, and spent a lot of time in Memphis, went to Florida State, has been in Oregon. And if you look at the 4 running backs that he landed in terms of got committed to him at Oregon, they came from Mississippi, Tennessee, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. So this is a wide, mass of land that he's been around. And so I do expect him to get back into Florida in the Southeast. And even when he was the 1 year at Western Kentucky, he got a 3-star running back from Alabama. So like he's got that footprint and that experience. So I think that will bode well, but also he doesn't like the notion of recruiting coaches. And we've talked in the past about the running backs coach being mainly a recruiter. He does not like that. He does not like coaches that just recruit. He's talked about this, where he has said that the running back position is the worst coach position in football. And he just, the notion of you just recruit the best guys and let them go, like he doesn't kind of respect that type of coach. And so he's pretty hands-on. Yesterday was his first day at practice for the Buckeyes, and was just pretty intent on watching more than getting after the players at that point, because he's obviously looking to see what they've got and what he has to deal with. So the feedback wasn't overflowing yesterday. I'm sure it will start tomorrow with their next practice, though.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tony, Locklyn had a good group to work with there at Oregon. I don't know how much he had to do with bringing in Bucky Irving, the Minnesota running back, who had a big year with over 1,000 yards last year, but also while he's off to the NFL, Jordan James, 11 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry last year, and Noah Whittington are the two guys that the Buckeyes are going to have to deal with in early October in Eugene that he recruited and signed as well there at Oregon. Those numbers fresh in my head from our Big Ten running backs ratings and rankings. If you want to take a look at those, you may be happy with the top two. Yes. All right. And as our guy Jordan is saying right here, Kevin, Tony, I asked you guys to put in a good word for me to Ryan Day. How come I didn't get the call for the running backs coach job?
Can't recruit.
Can't coach.
Other than that,
sorry, Jordan.
appreciate it, Jordan.
I was going to say Tony set that one up for me. I just had to. Sorry, I had to take you. I saw the shot and I took it. You took it and broke a major rule of engagement. He did another thing with that circus stunt flyby.
Well, that'll cover the flybys.
Yakov. Always appreciate Yakov being here. Thank you so much for that. Yakov, always connecting the past with the present here. Your Eclipse viewing plans, ? And then we've got Jeremiah Smith to Randy Moss. Good comp? Hopefully.
I'll just say that there was an eclipse in 1994 of some sort, and where I was at in Urbana, Ohio, it was cloudy. I couldn't really see it. So it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Monday, possibly going down to my sister-in-law's in Hamilton, which is right in the path of this thing. But there's also a chance that we may have interviews at Ohio State on Monday with Coach Day and Carlos Locklyn. So we're either doing that Monday or Wednesday. When one of the OSU people who works there found out that they were possibly doing interviews on Monday, he almost panicked. He was like, the eclipse is on Monday. Like we couldn't possibly conduct regular operations on Monday. There's an eclipse on Monday. And I was like, whatever. So,
Apparently, Sandusky is one of the places to be. It's one of the main pending weather conditions.
Yeah.
One of the main spots.
Go watch it from the like a Ferris wheel at Cedar Point or something like that. I'm sure there'll be nobody there. I'm sure that parking lot will be wide open. Just go and park and put some lawn chairs up. I'm not planning on anything. Steve, you mentioned the one back in the 90s. I was on a high school field trip for that one, I believe, and we were at a Greek Orthodox church, and we weren't allowed to go outside and watch it because it would have been disrespectful to the priest. So we just got to experience it from inside the church as things got dark, and
wow,
the priest was talking about something. Then we had one a few years back that was sort of impressive, but nothing like this. So I'm not going to try to get into any traffic. That's not that's not on my list.
Me either.
I don't even remember the 94 one. I was either in Columbus still in school if it were later in the year, or I was in Atlanta doing my internship. The one that Tony just mentioned, I was actually out at the airport. There was a little brewery out there that's no longer in business. And I think between like 10 of us that were there, we had like one pair of glasses. So I'm just like, whatever. I'm just happy to be drinking beer.
I did watch that one. I like the parking lot of the Canes on campus, just off campus, but I was watching it through the reflection in the car next to me. So I was like in the paint job, I was watching it reflected so I could see it, because you're not supposed to stare directly at it. So the way I consider it is like what Perseus did in Clash of the Titans when he was able to look at Medusa. That's how I watched the eclipse on that one.
These guys are the storytellers. I have absolutely no eclipse stories to tell. I do not remember any of them. Sorry, we will move on from there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that a lot of people have... Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of the Jeremiah Smith to Randy Moss comparisons, seeing him in person on Saturday, I got more Calvin Johnson vibes than Randy Moss, because they're two physically different people. Randy Moss is a skinnier kind of guy. there's nothing skinny about Jeremiah Smith. He's listed at 6'3", 215. He looks bigger than that. He looks taller than that. He's just physically a mismatch. Whereas Randy
He's
Moss
playing bigger than that.
Yeah, Randy Moss is athletically a mismatch, and not just because he played at Marshall. He was a mismatch when he played at Florida State and Notre Dame for 3 practices or whatever. But Jeremiah Smith is more. If you want to throw Hall of Fame wide receiver names at him, which is totally responsible, I would say more Calvin Johnson than Randy Moss.
Definitely not Hunter Renfrow. That would not be a good comp. I'll go that far. Okay. Appreciate that, Yakov. We have had requests through the years to have people challenge me in college football trivia. We had more of those this week. Therefore, we're going to go live at noon. I'm just going to show up. Somebody else is going to host a show and toss me college football trivia questions against whomever wants to show up. So we're going to be on the Big 12 channel directly following this show, and I'm going to answer questions for a half hour. So if that excites you, then please join us, or mildly interests you in any way, shape, or form. And Tony, did you say that one Dallin Hayden spoke to the media this week?
Mm-hmm.
My guy, I can't wait to hear what he had to say.
Well, he's not a man of many words. He's a pretty quiet guy and gives short answers, and talked about redshirting last year, and it was a mutual decision. And he saw it as a way forward for this year because of the guys they had last year. And then he was asked, well, do you still see that way forward? Did you still see that way forward when Quinshon Judkins announced that he was transferring and Travion Henderson announced that he was coming back? And he said, yeah, everything is fine. And I think what maybe we stress this, but I don't know how many people are hearing it. Everybody's going to play this year at every position because of the idea of 16 games. So the coaches are already talking about that. I asked James Laurinaitis about that. I've asked other coaches about that. That is something that they are already talking about and getting guys ready to play. Ryan Day talked about getting the young guys, the young defensive tackles, ready to play 25, 30 snaps early in the season so that the veterans are good to go in November, December, January when you need them. So I think with Hayden, it's really tough to get a third guy snaps at running back to get carries, especially when you've got a quarterback who is going to have 4 to 7 carries a game as well. But they just have to be really forceful in terms of, okay, Quinshon, Trey, you are both out this series, and we're going to run with Dallin. Like James Laurinaitis talked about how you kind of just get lost in it during a game, and they need to make sure that they are getting everybody in. But Dallin Hayden seems fine. I know everybody is like waiting for him to transfer. Everybody's waiting for him to transfer. One thing that Tony Alford did a pretty good job of is keeping the guys there. Mayan Williams, I think we waited for him to transfer every year of his career because Travion Henderson came in and supplanted him, but he stuck it out and until his 4th year when he left for the NFL. Chip Traynham leaves at the end of his career because he wants to go and finish out his career running the ball and not being a third guy. And, Evan Pryor just never happened for him. But Alfred did a good job of keeping guys that were going to play. He didn't have enough of them, which is one of the reasons he's gone now, and didn't have the contract extension. But Hayden seems fine. He did mention he's worked on fixing his weaknesses, and he did mention one of those weaknesses being pass protection, which is something that everybody has talked about as to why he doesn't play.